I love me the quirky ones. It's always the first thing that attaches me to a character. If ever they act in a weird or unusually witty way, it's part of the reason why I latched onto Eli so much. Not only was he an emo boy, but he was witty, he was quirky, he was charming. It was also my draw to Esme initially, and still kinda is. It's those things that most people just don't do that makes me keenly interested in these types of characters. And that also matches my initial thoughts on Imogen. I mean, her introduction, leaping to the ground, purposely bloodying her nose for a guy, and then out of nowhere claiming that Eli punched her, it certainly made her stand out. A big part of her charm was just how odd she was compared to everyone else. She seemed to follow a sort of different social code of conduct, and for the most part, she was fine with it. It's something that continued on throughout her whole time on the show, and while a less keen eye may think that by season 13 they made her the quirky, artsy lesbian, she kinda always was that from the beginning, except for the lesbian part. She was actually, one, very interested in Eli in the beginning, and two, never a lesbian. I can't remember where, but I'm pretty sure she described herself to be more pan. But a very interesting transition that I did notice through her run on the show is her fashion sense. When she started in season 11, she seemed to be more of Eli's style. Not quite full on goth or even emo, but very much accented like that. She'd have the spiked accessories, the chokers, and of course, the skull and crossbones sleeves. But then as her interest in Eli becomes less intense, she kind of starts to seem to drift away from that style. For a while, there's still the slightly punky accessories with her, but by the time Fiona realizes she has a crush on Imogen, she starts dressing more, for lack of a better term, fashionista. I guess more trendy, but sophisticatedly fashionable. She essentially starts dressing like Fiona. Not quite conventionally pretty, but more like a fancy pretty. You can tell I know a lot about fashion. And then after Fiona goes to college and start of season 13, though she doesn't go back to embracing the sort of alternative look, she still kind of keeps the style that she had while she was with Fiona, but makes it more to be hipster-like, more artsy and a little more quirky. She still wears rather fashionable dresses, especially for the time, but now she has the big hipster glasses. And it seems less that she's at a runway, but more like the cute girl in art class. And this is also around the time where she starts taking interest in Jack, a hipster, artsy, progressive type. Although there's something a little interesting here that we'll get back to. It would seem from these 3 stages of evolution that Imogen bases her fashion sense around whoever she's interested in, or at least on whoever she's with, which very much makes sense for at least Eli and Fiona. With Eli, she was head over heels obsessed with him. Considering the length she went to try to steal his heart, I wouldn't be surprised if it was a concerted effort to at least present herself as someone who is of Eli's style and thus make her seem a suitable match for him. And then as she becomes less enamored and starts to ease away from her obsession with Eli, she starts to dress a little bit more like she naturally would. But then during that period, she's hanging around Fiona, and hell, she becomes really close to Fiona. Not quite to the point of obsession like she had with Eli, but to the point where she tried to sabotage Fiona's career prospects in order to keep her near. And though maybe not intentional, but you can kind of read into, at least maybe Imogen is subconsciously copying Fiona because of how much she likes her. It kind of reminds me of the sort of friendship effect where you take on traits from the people around you. And for Imogen, she takes on their fashion sense. And I think that in part is what brings Imogen to dress the way she does in season 13 and onward. Although I would argue her sense of style in these seasons are much closer to how they naturally would be. Mainly because she starts dressing this way long before she's around Jack or even Becky. Sure, they likely very much influenced her fashion once she became close with them. We know Jack at least did with how she wore her hair. But Imogen had enough time to sort of breathe and try to figure out who Imogen Marino is and how she dresses. I mean, she starts the summer off with the big hipster classes. I wouldn't be surprised if all of this wasn't necessarily intended with the show. I very much could be reading this into a character who wasn't written that way, but it is something interesting to notice, and especially when you have a character on the show for that long, you do start to think about their transitional periods and why seemingly established things about them have disappeared. And with a show like Degreassi, there's a lot of things to think about. Not just because there's so many seasons of Degreassi, but because there are so many different characters to consider, so many different unique characters. Thank you very much for consuming this video, and until next time.